the Sentinel Mindset.
Good morning, everyone. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Super excited today about today's episode because today we're going to be talking to a lawyer, but not just any lawyer, a prosecutor. And this is something very important for many of those to hear that are in the industry of providing security services, and also for those in the whole law enforcement world. There's going to be a lot to take from today. To my left, I have David Shellnutt from the Biking Lawyer LLP. David, how are you today?
Thanks so much for having me here. I'm good.
Amazing. And also joined by the wonderful past guest, Steve Summerville, who is also the president of Stay Safe. And it was actually a good conversation that I had with Steve. I said, Steve, we need to bring someone in right now. And we've always had this conversation back and forth. He goes, I know just the person. So Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to see you again, Constantine.
Amazing.
Cheers.
So I want to start this off, this conversation, just because we're an agency. And, for us, I would be completely dishonest if I haven't told you that we have, through probably maybe in the last 10, 15 years, had to deal with lawyers, okay, because of situations that have happened.
Sorry.
Within our organization.
Not sincere.
Okay. And look, the reality is, in our talk outside in the green room, one of the things that, I would say that I've always viewed lawyers, and my daughter, by the way, wants to be a lawyer. She's actually studying right now. Is that, if you don't come correct as an individual, or if you don't have something that in place, you're going to get basically ripped apart, right? Because that's the job of a prosecutor, is trying to find holes in basically your argument. As an organization, we have a lot of our individuals that work in the events industry, and obviously we have other industries as well, like in healthcare. And we always emphasize the power of documentation in what we do, followed by obviously the immense training that they receive to give them the strong foundation when dealing with a situation. Now, I bring all this because recently we had one of our venues has like 4 security agencies there, and not all agencies are aligned in training, in practices, and basically even things like note-taking and such. And what happened was a person had a slip and fall, and had nothing to do with the security related, but they just end up suing everyone, okay? And one of the things that came out from talking to these insurance adjusters, they were telling us that usually law firms will wait within a 2-year window right towards the end just to make sure that when they do present themselves in the case, that they want to catch you off guard a bit, that you don't have you may not have your proper documentation reports. Now, we had all our stuff in order, so once they reviewed everything, it was like, wow, we didn't expect it to be on this level, and we were removed from the situation. Now they're going after the other groups, right? So I think it's so important for you here today, because I think a lot of people in the industry, first of all, as an agency who is pushing out manpower on a daily basis, that is providing protection, could put their agency in high risk if they don't have the proper tools in place. And I thought it'd be, as an opening question before we get into that, because I'm very, very interested in the Biking Lawyer. How did that come into play?
So the name sort of morphed out of me biking into my law firm job as a young lawyer downtown, and nearly getting clipped every single day by motorists or construction sites, and sort of went down the rabbit hole of like, okay, like what are my rights and entitlements here? And as I did that, and I fell in love with that area of the law, I was biking to work. I wanted to represent cyclists, so I became the Biking Lawyer.
Okay.
And it's just like a dedication to a passion area of mine, and so it's maybe doesn't speak Biking Lawyer, but another passion area of mine is police and use of force cases. Interesting, you talk about events and security at events, and I can tell you one of the reasons I got my law degree is in seeing how my friends who weren't white were treated by bouncers, security officers, and police in Guelph, Ontario when we were teenagers. And that was a big impetus behind me kind of doing the law that I do today.
Wow, we're gonna definitely open that up, okay? Yeah. But what I kind of opened up as being prepared as an organization, when you're someone that starts to receive the files that are coming in right now, the information, what are you usually looking for an organization that may appear disorganized, and how you can easily say this is going to be a slam dunk for me right now?
So there's two things we look at, right? It is injuries and damages and liability. And so if someone is seriously injured, we really take a hard look at that case, because as the greater damages, the greater risk for the insurance company and the security firm that they represent. And then the liability. How much of a slam dunk is this? Was it reasonable that the security guards either put hands on or used force in some way, or was this completely unnecessary? We got a video of it. We got people outside that videotaped just a security guard just going completely off the rails and giving a haymaker to somebody who wasn't even looking. Those are the kind of things we look at, and the decision to take a case is how big are the damages, how injured are they, and how bad was the behavior that led to it. And as those things fluctuate, that sort of determines that's a determination we make on taking a case or not.
Okay, I see. So you don't really look at it from this is going to take a really long time. You look at it more from like the severity of the injury. The time in personal injury law, and given the current status of the courts in Ontario, it's going to be a long time. Okay.
That's just how it is. A concussion, if you got a concussion from a strike from a police officer or from a security guard, a doctor's not going to comment on that formally until the 2-year mark. Okay, this is what their long-term brain injury implications are going to be. So for medical conditions, we're waiting. And the court systems we're waiting. That's the name of our game. You did mention that some law firms wait until the 2-year mark.
Yes.
That's not our practice. We like to be very aggressive. We like to let them know that this is a serious issue that we're looking at here. We want everything, and we want to get moving on it quickly.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's good. So one of the things that we do with Steve's program is we do a lot of training.
Yeah.
And Stay Safe has been a breath of fresh air and a game changer for us in our organization. And all our people go through that training. There's a lot of agencies that don't train. Simply put, they say we don't have the budgets for it. Okay. Have you dealt with situations where you basically have to deal with an agency, for example, that their people did not have training, and because of that, it pretty much created a loss for them?
So that is usually how things happen. Poor or no training lead to injuries in unfortunate situations.
Poor decisions.
Poor decisions, exactly, Steve. And I can't believe that there's no money for training. And that's like a very short-sighted thing, because if you get 1, 2 claims, your insurance company is going to start knocking at your door, and maybe you're not going to be able to get insured. And then you're not going to be able to go to the Molson Amphitheater or Budweiser Stage as is now, and get the job, because you know this, Constantine. You probably got to give a certificate of insurance for your team
That's
that
right.
go in there. So if you keep sending out people without proper training who are injuring folks, and your insurance company cuts you off, well, you should have spent some money on Steve's training.
Right, right, exactly. So that is definitely something that I know lacks in the industry. We're trying to elevate the industry. We're trying to, we like to say it's a call to find protectors, people that truly want to lead with empathy and create a difference, an experience for people in any venue. We find that a lot of people that are just being hired, and there's no really background checks, there's no really police checks, there's no really strong references, are plaguing the industry more than ever. Are these types of things that you look at in a discovery process? And when people start hearing the word discovery, right, can you just explain how the process works? Meaning as in, I've just been served, okay, and it's day one. And right now, I'm going to contact my insurance company. The insurance company is going to find me a lawyer right now. And then somewhere along the line, I'm going to meet your firm, okay? Can you just guide the process and when the discovery process comes in, explaining that, but just so people can understand the system? Sure.
So discovery for us is sort of two-tiered. There's documentary discovery. And so right out of the gate, I send you a letter and say, I want this, 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 and this. And we were talking about this earlier. I want your emails about this event. I want the internal notes from your staff. I want your policies and procedures. I want training dates. I want this person's background, all that stuff. And in most cases, I get it. And that sort of starts the ball rolling. And then there's the in-person discovery, where I take a crack at the people who are alleged to have caused the harm and or a representative from the company. And that's where we ask pretty direct and open-ended questions and just gather as much information as we can about the incident. So it's your documents and it's your people. We're going to get to chat and discover all of it, and vice versa.
Okay.
You folks get to your lawyers get to look at our clients' medical records to see that the injuries are real and severe, and then get a shot at talking to that person about their interpretation of what happened at the event or incident that led to them being injured.
Okay. One thing Dave may have not identified, but is that discovery process can certainly be used in a trial. The evidence that you provided during discovery can be used to either support or not what you said, and why did your evidence change?
Right.
Or did you change the answer? That sort of thing. So what you say, you're committed to, and you've committed to potentially consequence with that discovery. And by saying, I don't know, I have no answer for that, not able to respond, suddenly you have a different response during trial, a plaintiff lawyer such as Dave would certainly take that to task. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And the dodging questions and not recalling things, that for me it isn't a good look. When a judge or an arbitrator looks at that transcript and sees you not remembering anything pertaining to the incidents of the event, but you can remember all these other things, it doesn't look good.
So when you, for example, send this request, I need to see. I like to see your memo books. I like to see, any incident reports. I like to see the training of the guards. I like to see when you start getting like, we don't have these two here, but we can give you this, or it's somewhere in our files, or you get excuses, right? When you start getting that, in your mind, you're thinking, okay, this could end up being a lot easier for us than what we anticipate right now.
Yeah, and then I will, whatever you don't produce to me, I'm going to ask your person about it. And if they said, well, actually, yeah, there is a training manual, well, that's not going to be very good if you had refused to produce it in advance. And I'm going to say that on the record, and the judge is going to look at that. But because I want to get all this stuff, and I want to, as a lawyer, look at it, but we hire professionals to look at it as well. So we hire people with security training, policing training, detective work to look at this stuff and say, okay, you have your lawyerly opinions, but this is my expert opinion on it. These policies or procedures are failing in these regards, and then I sort of take that and run with it.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not just me. We have people that really are experienced.
Okay, I see. So that's again very interesting. So the discovery process, then you'd go trying to pick out exactly the specifics. So then you can kind of build your argument. So what about reporting, right? So again, one thing that I can tell you that I find a lot that lacks in this industry is reporting, meaning as in people do not utilize their memo books or they don't accurately document, right? When you start seeing stuff like that as well for yourself, how do you interpret that?
Nothing better than contemporaneous, honest evidence from the time. So an incident happens, and one of your staff goes and writes down, point form, honestly, what happened. And they don't all sit in a group together and do it. They go separately and do it, because those are questions I ask. Oh, who'd you write this with? Where did you do that? Who else was there? Did you talk about this answer here? So getting that honest reporting and right out of the gate at the time of the incident is better than any evidence that sort of comes later, because it's contemporaneous and it's more truthful almost. And I can tell you, if I look at a report that is written at the time and it is thorough, detailed, and seems truthful, like that to me that's very strong for or against my case. Usually against it. Here's the reasons why we did this. Et cetera, et cetera. That's like, that helps push people like me away.
Okay.
So just to emphasize that a bit further, thank you for that, Dave. But would you agree or disagree if you tell me, but a fulsome, very detailed narrative of an incident could either trigger liability or could somewhat show that this particular individual has not committed an act that could be speaking to something like tort? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So a fulsome report can also sometimes get you out of trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. If there are holes in it, and my client has a broken jaw, but there's no mention of any strike to the face, that to me is incomplete reporting, and it starts to stink a bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you maybe, this is something that I mean, look, I was told this over time and I started learning, but I think for the viewer listening, why is it that when someone gets sued, they're suing all parties? For example, if there's an event that's happening at a City of Toronto property, and then there's like a cleaning service and the security company and then the city, why is it that everyone is getting sued opposed to the actual entity that caused the situation?
Yeah. So I hate doing this. We have a lot of claims for cyclists where there's like negligent construction, and I have to put the city on notice. And often I don't know who the construction company is. And the first thing I do is I say to the City of Toronto, "Hey, who's working here? Who's responsible?" And I'm like, I want to know this because I don't want to sue people that aren't responsible.
Right.
But often insurance companies, cities, events, they won't give us an answer. And so I'm left with 6 names that may or may not have responsibility here. I got to sue everybody because I got only 2 years to do it. And if I miss one of these important parties and it comes out later, my client could be losing their claim, and I'm as a lawyer in a lot of trouble. So we sue everybody out of abundance of caution. But if there's indemnification agreements or clear, convincing evidence that the party, one of the parties we sued isn't responsible, we let them out.
Okay, makes sense.
No point keeping them in.
Which is another step too, as well, Constantine. I think Dave would agree to this. During discovery, you can identify other individuals that may or may not have been involved and a level of negligence, perhaps culpability that they do. There can also be what's called amended statement of claim, where within the 2-year window, another individual could be named or added or removed from a statement of claim.
Interesting. So when these things are requested, if I just simply refuse them, I'm not giving you that, right? Is that hurting me?
I'm probably going to go before a judge and get a order for it and a cost award against you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's no escaping.
Well, if it's relevant to the proceedings, like, an officer who wasn't there's mental health records in the previous 10 years, you could argue that that's not relevant. So certain things that aren't relevant, shouldn't be produced, and you shouldn't just throw everything. Obviously your lawyer and your insurance company is going to advise you, but whatever is relevant to the proceeding or could be, should be produced.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hiding and being difficult can have cost consequences. It can really damage the rapport between the parties and make ultimately resolving the matter much more difficult. If someone is seen to be combative against an honestly and wrongfully injured person, that can really put the back up of the injured person and say, 6 months down the road, you want to offer what you consider a reasonable settlement. They'll be like, no, you have dragged me through this and I'm going for blood now. And so it's just like not the right way to do litigation.
No, that's good. Yeah. That's good. I want to bring Steve in right now as, I identified Steve as the president of Stay Safe, and he is. There's no dishonesty there. But what Steve also is an expert witness.
Yes.
Okay. And, what I wanted to talk about a little bit quickly here is the relationship in a court setting that, your role would have with a prosecutor.
Okay. Fair question. Well, first of all, there is no relationship. There is no rapport. And my relationship, my duties to the court, to be nonpartisan, which means I don't take sides. I don't have a vested interest in your claim or not. So when you retain me, we work amicably together, but we're not friendly in the sense that even though you retain me, if the plaintiff counsel has retained me, and you're paying my fees, doesn't mean that I'm automatically support you in the judicial system. Mm-hmm. My duty is to the court. Actually, even in civil litigation, I need to sign off a form recognizing that duty to the court. It's called Form 53, but the numbers don't matter. What it talks about is an acknowledgement that I'm not here for any party. I'm not an advocate for any party. So that's the first thing. So when I speak to a lawyer, and by the way, I work plaintiff and defense lawyers. I'm 50-50. I'm not a hired gun. We probably shouldn't say hired gun in 2024, but I don't have any agenda. I speak honestly and clearly under oath to what I'm saying, and I would not misrepresent myself to a plaintiff lawyer. So quite candidly, if I'm having a chat with counsel, before I'm retained, I need to know the substance of the case and see whether my background is able to assist you. I can't manufacture expertise. And if I think that's out of my wheelhouse or on my threshold of knowledge, my duty is also to inform counsel. I said, well, I don't believe I'm an expert in that area. I don't think I could even speak to it as an expert.
Okay.
As a common person, sure, but you're looking for an expert evidence. You might want to look at this individual or person with this sort of background. But when I look at a case, the way I even have to speak to it, I'm speaking to the court. I need to give them options and alternatives. I can't make the decision of the court. So, the guy is or girl is downright guilty, absolutely, boom, finished. That's not my role. I need to put out there is to what the courts might consider. A judge has significant knowledge, trier of fact. And a lot of times, the only time I can testify is if it's going to assist the court or assist a trier, assist a justice, within maybe areas that the justice is not completely familiar with. And usually I find in terms of training in law enforcement or security in that minutia, especially de-escalation training and what a person would be trained, say, under a solicitor general, that sort of thing, that's usually not within the wheelhouse of a court. So they will permit you with a certain instruction, certain scope to testify. They'll lay out the actual areas that you're able to speak to. So under that guise, that's generally the relationship or rapport I would have with a lawyer. We'll be friendly, but we're not friends.
Okay.
Is that fair?
No, 100%. And I'm going to take a relationship out. When David, when you're looking for an expert witness, for example, like someone like Steve Summerville, what are you looking for? In someone's background as a basically expert witness.
I think a lot of lawyers are different and view these things differently, but we strive to be the best at what we do and respected, so that when I bring a case against you, you know that we mean business. And so that means finding someone who isn't, as Steve said, a hired gun or a patsy for the defense or the plaintiff bar. I want someone who is going to be looked at by a judge as honest and believable, and that the defense lawyer isn't going to be able to say, well, you've written 90% of your reports for plaintiff lawyers, and throw bias at the expert's way. I want to do that to their person, but I don't want them to do that to mine. So I want someone who does reports for both, and with a good reputation in their field and with a lot of experience. We do a lot of police cases, and so it's really important to have someone who has been police.
Okay, yeah. And that's right. For those listening, Steve has 24 years. Yes, Staff Sergeant, Toronto Police.
Finished teaching at the Ontario Police College. Last 8-9 years of my career was all teaching. And it's the issues of not only use of force, but it's the power of communications and the issue of de-escalation, which I think is a great topic to get into as a segue, because when a lot of times we look at cases involving use of force application, what led up to it? What options did that security officer, the police officer have in terms of judgment? And especially in 2024, the use of force has become very transparent, in my humble view, what your mindset was and what steps I took reasonable to try to calm you, to try to create a rapport with you as a professional, in trying to disarm. When I disarm, not literally, but in terms of emotion or anger or fear or hostility, and to show the court as a person, a protector of you. Well, whether it be a person wearing a uniform, whether it be in healthcare or a bar or a pub or a live event or working as a peace officer, is that literally the last resort was the last resort. And there was no other more reasonable means to do it. I had to do it. And usually the bottom line is, was it there for purposes of protection? Protecting whom? And if I come into this room and you two are arguing and I immediately put my hands on you within 2 seconds of entering the room, that's going to be somewhat difficult, maybe not impossible, but to articulate the reasonable steps you took or considered to try to engage a person with de-escalation techniques. Those are huge issues, which I'm finding now in 2024 is becoming an issue of litigation and conversation and discovery evidence to talk about how were you trained, especially in the powers of de-escalation and empathy, and try to put yourself in a person's shoes. And when you try to say in your report that this person was resisting you, what if they were afraid of you and fearful of you? And those are real live issues of trial now coming out where trials of fact are saying, yeah, the training is there, I get the training, but the application in this case did not meet that threshold of reasonable.
Interesting. Let me ask you guys this, because you're both actively involved. Have you noticed over the last, let's just call it 5 years, has there been a surge in incidents happening? Are more things happening now opposed to maybe like in past years?
I'll let Dave respond to that first, if I may.
I would say that problem, and I'm speaking not about security, but more policing. Problems in policing have been endemic for some time. And so I would bet that it's probably a pretty straight line on incidents.
Okay.
It's not like, we have a lot of talk about diversity training and de-escalation, but I'm still seeing similar patterns in incidents today that I did earlier in my career. I'm seeing improvements too. There's one case that we've got right now that in 2020, my client was having a tough time, and then police came upon him. Force was used. There was an injury in that force, and then he was struck while he was under control and sustained a serious injury.
Restrained.
Yeah. Sustained a serious injury. That was 2020, and that officer is being charged now for assault. Last year, my client was having a similar episode of being unwell, and there's no other service to call to get someone brought to a hospital
like
for,
a wellness
for
check.
care. Yeah, and so I went with police. They were very kind to allow me to do that, and I explained the sort of situation. And one officer really was amicable, knew sort of the right way to handle this, and they used minimal force to detain him, and we all peacefully walked out of there. So it was really great to see. I mean, his lawyer was there, so maybe that colored the scenario, but it was to see that it can be done in a way that doesn't result in injury to any party. So I am seeing some improvements, but certainly there are cases, and people will know in the media, the case of Devon Fowlin, where, within the last year, we've seen some pretty violent stuff.
Right. It's funny. We do a lot of advocating for basically people getting into policing careers here. But the one thing, I was talking to a police officer yesterday at an event, and he was saying in the last 5 years, police have always had a negative reputation. Always had a negative reputation. If you compare them to like a firefighter, for example, right? But over the last 5 years, he's noticed like the hate for police has increased dramatically right now, which I find should be even more reason why the individuals looking to come into that world should really have an empathetic heart in how they approach the situation, because they already don't have a lot of the public's buy-in to begin with.
I think I don't know if I see hate, but I see the public concerned that we keep spending boundless amounts of money on policing, but it doesn't solve the root problems. And so I think people are frustrated that we're not actually dealing with the root problems of crime and societal issues, and we're just throwing money at cleanup at the end.
Right.
And so I can see that, and we can see police forces who, Thunder Bay is a real good example. Toronto is a good example, where there's an acknowledged targeting and increase in use of force depending on your race.
Right.
And there's apologies, but we don't actually see anything being done to deal with it, So I think, like, as our society becomes more open and we see our institutions' failings more obviously, yeah, sure, the public's going to be upset about it. And if we keep not doing anything about it, people are going to continue to be pissed.
No, look, you raised up something. Look, my wife is black, okay? And whenever I bring this up to paint context here, experiences growing up are not positive, right, with the family and all. However, whenever they hear announcements that, police want extra budgets, millions and millions of dollars, in her mind, she works with the government, it's like, well, can't that money not go to more maybe like areas of like maybe mental health training or certain areas that would really help people deal with situations? Kind of seems to me aligning a lot where your thinking is, like resources could be.
And we don't want to set like that wellness check that I went on with those officers. Those 5 officers could be doing something much more useful with their time. None of them have mental health training. Right. So why are they going to address a situation like that? They don't want to be there. We don't want the, so we've really got to change sort of things, and people that put themselves in service, like, that's a really important thing. And so we shouldn't put them in impossible situations. Mm-hmm. And so, there's a lot of talk about defunding and abolition, but I don't know if it's that. We shouldn't get caught up on those words. We should be putting police on tasks that they're properly trained for. And if someone else can come in and step and do something that they don't even want to do, let's do that.
If I could just jump in as well. In terms of skepticism or negativity directed towards police, it depends on where that voice is coming from. If it's the media, if it is a particular group of individuals, your interpretation of how you're viewed as a person wearing uniform is subjective. There are a lot of supporters out there. Just because we don't hear about them, or perhaps they're not writing or don't have control of social media, doesn't mean it's not any less relevant. But in terms of an upswing, I've seen over the last 5 years a fair bit of cases, at least coming across my desk, in terms of how people are dealing with people suffering from issues of mental health and the expectations of a police officer responding to a call. See, police officers don't pick and choose the 911 calls that they go to. It's not like I go out of my way to respond to 123 any street to deal with an individual. I'm dispatched there. I have a duty. I'm legally bound, duty bound to respond. But one thing that just challenged me, Dave mentioned about the issue of training. There is a program, it's revered, it's well thought of, and it's a mobile crisis intervention team, which is a police officer tag teaming up with a frontline clinician or an emergency mental health nurse. And it's arguably the mental health nurse can put a veil of calm and peace, knowing how to say, what not to say, and deal with a person in crisis. And there's a medical definition for crisis where use of force and hopefully lethal force is never used or administered. I believe that program has met a lot of success, and it's certainly being, implemented. It's being added onto. But my concern is why will we have an individual who's a clinician, has this special training, or unique training, that's not provided to a police officer, or why it can't be transferred to a police officer? I find it difficult that arguably a person serving the community is not provided the same training as arguably is recognized within this industry, saying, oh, I've got the magic tools and the words and the mentality to deal with it. Is it a hiring issue, or is it a particular program that needs to be delivered? I have a hard time accepting, as a member of the community, as a taxpayer, as to why police officers can't have the same training and the same application or association with that training. Keeping a look at healthcare statistics, healthcare right now, even though they have this incredible skill set, right now, according to the Interior Ministry of Health, the number one place where lost hours in this province comes out of healthcare. There's more healthcare technicians, nurses, long-term healthcare, emergency staff are being assaulted than police and corrections combined. So why is it we clinicians, our mental health specialists, are able to provide this formula success in the street, dealing with violence and people in health, but they can't apply it in their healthcare facilities. So there's a bit of disconnect with that. But I think training is a great thing. You may or may not be aware, each of you, in January, just this past year, 3 new days of training have been tacked on to the Ontario Police College program, all dealing with mental health and de-escalation, dealing with that. And the program is being taught by clinicians.
And that's supposed to help.
Well, it's new hires.
Yes.
It's certainly new recruits. Doesn't mean that the front line is going to receive that training. Even the new use of force package has come out. This been argued it's going to take 4 to 5 years to get that through.
Wow.
So it's what we place priority on. But I do agree. It's how we're trained. Words, verbiage, words, kindness, compassion is also inclusive for policing. If that's added on, tacked on, or made applicable during a hiring protocol, hiring the right personality probably could make a difference in the outcome.
So you said the right personnel. The mantra for police service is to serve and protect.
Yes.
For people in the security industry is to protect, right? What is a protector? Want to help others. Sometimes that message can get lost, right? Which could indicate sometimes maybe the person doing the job is not the right person for the job, right? But at the end of the day, sometimes you got to learn the hard way when you meet a guy like David. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Let me throw this out, body cams. So we use body cameras for some of our client sites, but a lot of our clients don't like it. They just don't. I don't like the optics. It looks too, invasive. How, in your opinion, if you have a body camera that can capture a situation, how important is that for, first of all, the client? Because again, when you're going to come out, you're going to come after everyone, right? If you have sufficient footage that can back someone's claim, how important is that to a case when you're looking at that, David?
Yeah, I certainly have like a political stance on body cameras, but I'll leave that aside.
Okay.
I think that obviously throughout the history of police cases, it's he said, she said, and who you're going to believe, law enforcement agent or a prisoner, or someone alleged to have committed crimes, and
right.
that we know where that usually falls in a courtroom. So a body cam in some ways has taken provides a more neutral position on what's happened. And so for us, we've successfully used body cameras to help people where if there weren't body cameras, it'd be very difficult to take 3 officers' notes and testimony against one young black man and be successful on that. And in fact, that is what happened in a recent case of ours. It's very public. And the Police Complaints Commission looked through the case first and read the notes, and they had a phone call with me like, "Well, we don't think anything. We hear what your client says, but we read the notes. We don't think anything bad happened here." And then they got the body camera footage, and they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna have a hearing, and these guys there's gonna be misconduct charges against them." So the body camera in that case really helped demonstrate what my client was saying was actually the case.
Would you recommend? I know you said you have a political view, but would you recommend, people be open to body cam usage?
Yeah, I mean, what I mean by that is I don't think body cameras stop violence.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
when the George Floyd and Regis Kaczynski-Paquette protests were happening in 2020, police services and politicians said body cameras will make police accountable and keep people safe. And that's just not true. Like, violence keeps happening. It's just caught on video. I think, though, for private venues, yeah, I can understand certain consent issues with their patrons. This isn't like a random person in a highway traffic stop. This is someone who paid a ticket to your event, and now you're filming them. So there's got to be some sort of protections around that. In where does that video go and what's done with it? But I think from my experience, it really provides the answers if there's a lot of questions as to what happened. It can provide a very direct and in quotes unbiased view of the proceeding or the incident and what happened. So put it in a lock safe.
See, video doesn't lie. Video doesn't have an agenda. It might require explanation. It might require articulation. And video doesn't always capture it through the lens of your eyes and what you've seen. So it wouldn't, for example, if a camera's behind you in this room, you wouldn't necessarily see the perspective of my view as to what I'm seeing at this distance and this level and what I'm experiencing. But it's certainly a great means to be able to document, and it's not an absolute means of explanation, but at times you can provide a good basis of determining validity as to interaction between two people or a group of people. Mm-hmm. Depends.
For sure. Let me ask you this. With cases both in police and the security world, how is liability and negligence determined when you're looking at it, when you're seeing it from an overall, like just a vague perspective?
What's reasonable?
Well, Section 34 of the Criminal Code for Citizens Arrest and Self-Defense Act actually talks about citizens' actions must be reasonable and necessary. And then there's 5 examples on Section 30 for the court, what the court states the court may consider the following be reasonable. So it gives you a little bit of context there. And that has been used, as I've seen, in a number of cases against police and for police, because police are also accountable to Section 34 of the code. But situations as other means that you have with use of force application, was there the duty to protect, who was being protected, size differential, age differential, cultural clashes, those sort of areas, the magnitude of what you did or not did. If I'm waving my finger and disagreeing and asking to speak to your supervisor and you strike me or administer some form of blow, that's not consistent with the resistance. So it gives you a bit of a platform, but that in itself, even though that piece of legislation is a decade old, it hasn't remedied the need for involvement from the courts, hasn't really affected the amount of charges or cases. One thing, I read a report, I wish I reviewed it before I came here today, but it talked about since body cams, I believe it was in Ontario, through the Ontario Chiefs of Police Association, body cams being implemented, use of force applications have not been reduced, and complaints have not been reduced. It's been pretty well read across the board.
Interesting.
Which, don't know if I'm surprised now or not. I think at this age and stage of my life, nothing really surprises me, shocks me, but it had no impact. It stayed the same. So other than recording it and creating a need for data recovery and stuff like that, nothing has really changed.
Very interesting. The relationship with insurance companies and prosecutors. Can you talk a little bit about that? My experience, and I'll only share from my experience. I find that usually what ends up happening, and I'll give you an actual story, an actual situation that happened. So one of our client sites, it's a 5-star hotel that has like a lounge, and one of our personnel were working at this venue, and there was a situation that happened with a patron, a female patron, and a male, and it had something to do with the way he spoke to her, and they approached our security and said, "Hey, listen, this is what just happened." So our security went to the individual to speak to them and said, "Listen, we need you to leave the premises right now." And the person goes, "I'm so sorry, I wasn't meant to be disrespectful," and he kind of shook our security's hand. The female patron saw this and automatically assumed that there was a connection and said, "Wait a second, this is how they're dealing with individuals." And she ended up suing. Okay, so she sued the hotel, we got sued. And this case was probably in court but in process for like 2 years. Essentially what ended up happening is we had to pay our deductible out. Okay, we lost in this situation here. And when I went to the insurance, I'm like, what do you mean you guys should have defended us? I was like angry and upset at them. And they said, "Look, this is the industry. We got to outweigh the cost and time, and this is taking way too much time and resources. So we're going to just put this through." So to me, I always thought to myself, man, like that means literally anyone at any point can kind of go through that same process, and you just keep on paying out your deductibles. So if you can maybe just talk a little bit about the relationship about the insurance companies and your firms.
Yeah, that's not my experience, and so I don't want your listeners to worry that lawyers like me are just going to send you notice letter after notice letter for every single incident. I think there's a real good assessment by defense insurance adjusters, and if a defense lawyer is brought on and a discussion about them, it's like, what is the litigation risk here? Maybe there was some factors about that person and the interaction on the male and the security guard that didn't really look very good, and that raises the risk. Should we pay this person out 20 grand, or do we have a 50% chance of losing at trial and having to pay 50% of 100 grand? Mm-hmm. So it's all done like a calculus like that. I can tell you that every single security card case that I have and every single police case that I have, the insurance company or the municipality or the province and their insurance companies fights those cases.
Okay.
Like they take them seriously, and they don't. I'm not just getting checks. I'm not buying Range Rovers on checks falling from the sky.
Right.
Like these cases are fought. I think like to dissuade that kind of thing, that assumption happening that, hey, we just got to make a claim against this company, and then they'll cut us a 10 grand check.
Right.
Like they take a real hard line on this stuff.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
that's my experience. Anyway.
No, for sure, absolutely. Yeah. And look, I think that the more you know, the more people can understand how to navigate around.
Maybe it feels better. Maybe you can feel better about your deductible because you paid it because they thought, oh, there's a chance here.
Yeah. No, for sure. So I want to talk from two sides right now. So from the police side and also from the agency side. Just based on your experiences in cases that you deal with, and obviously the stories and situations, what would you say to a security agency? Say, look, if you look at these key things and you do these things within your organization, if ever there's a situation where you are sued for whatever reason, it will put you in a upper hand advantage compared to if you did not have them. What would you say those would be?
What we talked about earlier, proven, because it's a question I always ask, what training do you have? What de-escalation training do you have? And if you can say, we got this, and this person's done 10 hours every year for 5 years on it. So proof that the person's well-trained, and really leaning into trying to resolve things through de-escalation. Like you folks are customer service in many ways,
Absolutely, yeah.
Client-facing, you've got to take every step possible, and you're dealing with, I'm an alcoholic. I used to go to events and get pretty hammered, You're dealing with some unruly people sometimes. You've got to make sure you've taken every single step to de-escalate and calm things down, and not run to hands-on quickly, you know. If you can show training and that you did your level best to be reasonable, and this person was just belligerent and causing a threat to you, your team, and other patrons, tough for us to argue that, you know.
Okay.
One question I'd like to just ask Dave, get a legal opinion.
Yeah, of course, Steve.
When you litigate tort police, it's recognized that the curriculum is being authorized by the Solicitor General. It's codified. It's consistent throughout the province, as is policy and procedure and expectations. And also there's legislation compelling police officers to comply with their training and the training within. In security, it's not codified. It's not legislated. There is no mandatory training requirement. And when a company, let's just say ABC Security, professes that they provided training, what steps is a plaintiff lawyer able to take to vet the training and validate the training and show that it's either valid or not?
Well, part of the discussion I have with the defendant, the person who did the harm, or the company manager, whoever is appearing there, I ask a lot of questions. And then it's to get someone with experience like Steve or others to look and say, this maybe doesn't meet the standard, or yeah, it looks good on paper, but John Smith only went to this once and he's been working with them for 3 years. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because what we find too, there's in a security firm, often there are some people that have the training, some don't. And you get a particular group of people or deployment, if you will, that some have training, some don't, or different training. Cut through it. There's a risk there. I propose there's a risk because sometimes the guard themselves are at risk if they haven't had the training, or perhaps the public, the citizens might be. If you look at live events where alcoholic beverages are served, and usually one of the greatest challenges for a live event is people being ejected, forcibly ejected, being removed from the event. Usually alcohol is the scene. So most people have been vetted. They're sober to get in. Sometime throughout the night, your alcohol management system failed. Somebody got drunk on your watch. And now you've made profit on their sobriety, and now you're asking to turf them out. And there's resistance, hands-on. That is a great avenue of strife and usually results in litigation. But the issue of training, again, and do you see plaintiff lawyers vetting the trainer of those training companies, those security companies?
Okay,
What
that's
background,
good. That's
what background does that trainer have to beat a litmus test or that threshold? Did I pull the stuff off of internet, just put it together, a quick read this page in the training? What constitutes training? Where you could rip them apart and stand to show that you've got no background. What about even the requirement for an insurer, a third-party insurer, to be insured, where there's no insurance covering off that person's ability to provide an opinion, and how that might stand up today in 2024 in litigation?
Yeah, if you've promised your insurance company a certain level and qualification of your team, and you don't do that and you cut corners, maybe they yank their $10 million policy on you.
It's like saying you have winter tires and
Yeah.
you get, and then you don't have them. Yeah,
Yes,
it's the exact same thing.
Good analogy.
Yeah,
Good
yeah.
analogy. But there's a number of companies that provide in-house training without any real significant background to qualify it. And I do think that there is risk to that corporation, if you will, by suggesting that, oh, yeah, I'm able to do the training, but what background do I have?
Yeah, Dave, do you look at that? Like, for example, when you deal with situations and you do get into that training module, like, where did you get your training from?
Everything. We do deep dives on the companies, the people involved, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so this is good. So Steve has a one of his modules in the Stay Safe catalog is MORB, Management of Resistance Behavior, in which I always describe it as the psychology of de-escalation through communication.
Oh, that's
okay?
good. I'm
Yeah.
gonna steal that.
Yeah. So
you.
the relevance of security, being able to de-escalate using verbal, communication, opposed to going right to use of force. Can you speak a little bit about that?
That's like what leads to the lawsuit. Was it what you did your actions constitute something reasonable, and a reasonable course of action? And so, like I said earlier, if you take steps to de-escalate, then that lowers the chances that my case is going to be successful against you, because you've done X, Y, Z, and my person was still belligerent and took a swing at you.
Yeah.
Okay, then hands on is fine.
Okay.
Or fine in quotes. The more you do in the de-escalation realm before you go hands on, the lower the risk of getting a letter from someone like me.
No, that's awesome. There's one thing I want to bring up, because you talked about a qualified trainer, right? So we know that there's we know that there's entities out there that are also training, and I've seen security, like for example, knife workshops or things that really don't really have application in the industry. If you're someone that, for example, gets this kind of training, they how to utilize a knife and also defend from a knife, and you're in a situation where you actually bring a knife to work and you do that, this is another thing again that you would look at, because again, I want to speak to what's actually happening in the industry.
Well, if you bring a knife and that's not part of your kit or your requirements or anything like that, and even if it is, you're allowed to carry one for God knows what reason,
right?
And you use it not for that reason, but on somebody, that is going to be a real big problem for you.
Same thing with batons.
Well, absolutely, yeah.
You're not. You see, in the Ministry of Ontario, you need to have a course acceptable to the registrar, and you have to be insured for that to prove that there's a rider to that. And other companies think, well, not a lot of companies, but some guards say, I have my own baton for my own protection.
Right.
And that creates a whole
and how you,
world of
even
pain.
if you have authorization to use that or use force, it's how it's used. Like we have a lot of these police neon neck cases, and it's, okay, force was reasonable to be used, but the force in how you used it was not reasonable. Like you could have caused major damage, and we've got to litigate these things so that they're not done. And it's the same with baton use. Okay, you had a baton and the person was being unwieldy, but you didn't need to strike them in the face.
Right.
Are you trained? I ask, are you trained to strike them in the face? No, we're trained to strike them in the arm. Are you trained to put your knee on the neck? No, we're trained to put it on the upper shoulder. But you put it on the neck, right? But you struck them in the face, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay, well, there's my case.
And not only that, but also there's been cases where people just take out the baton for intimidation, which obviously I would assume would also be frowned upon as well.
And like you got to think like not only the intimidation, but that's not de-escalation. You are escalating.
Exactly.
That thing could go way worse.
That's right.
You could, and maybe the person gets away with self-defense because they thought you were going to strike them.
Right.
That is a real problem. I think.
And
go on,
that's a
Steve.
huge key. Thank you for that. It's interesting how we see some people wearing uniform, either through cross-examination or report. They say, oh, no, I withdrew my baton, raised it to my shoulder, and told him I was going to hit you with my baton. And they call that or identify that as being a de-escalation technique.
Wow.
Absolutely not. You're about to thump and dump me, hit me with a hard metal object, and you're thinking that's going to calm me down? 3 words, run, force, run at that moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
I am thinking I'm in trouble. Hardly is that a means to de-escalate. And I think it's a strong message. Thank you for putting it out there, because that is a devastating consequence when a person says, yeah, he pulled a baton or she pulled a baton on me, and I was compelled to protect myself.
Right. I'll tell you, Steve, like, again, I think a lot of the stuff that's happening here is going to be keeping you very busy, very, very busy, because it doesn't stop. Honestly, it's absolutely mind-blowing. But, we feel like, there's an organization right now that has recently been formed called the Security Guard Association of Ontario, and they're trying to get together to utilize a body of, experts and passionate individuals that want to see the industry change and level up. Because right now, David, like the industry is very messy. Like the standards to get hired, the training not being provided, and it goes on and on and on. And there's an influx of people now. It's just so easy to get your license. So a lot of it has to get changed from the top. We talked a little bit about policing as well. So about, we said, what would you advise an agency? What would you advise the police? Right? And now this could open a whole can of worms right now. But from the most simplistic level right now to kind of like say, listen, to avoid, putting yourself in situations where you'll meet me and, and lose, what would you suggest would be situations that try these practices as a general statement?
Oh, I think that's very kind that you would think that they would want to hear from me or anything like that.
I'm optimistic.
Yeah, just like from case by case situation that I have, really train your people in de-escalation, really understand why certain communities react in negative ways to your presence, and how maybe different techniques and tools could be used in those communities. It's a question I ask on discoveries. Are you aware that members of the Black community may have a fear of police? And maybe that colored the interaction, and you perceive that as a negative one, and so you up the ante. So it's the uniqueness of certain interactions with certain communities I think is important, and I mean, I get a lot of money's at stake. A lot of people are getting jobs, getting paid real well, but I think we have to have honest conversations about detasking. We should have more mental health professionals. It's not the 3-day course is great, but if you have a degree in nursing is different, you know. And we simply our police just aren't required to have those degrees to come in.
No, they're not.
They're not required to have any degrees right now. And so
Can you just pause for a second? Can you speak a little bit about that? What's your thoughts on that? Just because that recently did happen.
I got a lot of them. No, listen, this is an incredibly difficult job.
Yes.
Very difficult. However, we compensate you quite well for that. I say we because I'm a taxpayer.
Yeah.
We compensate you quite well for that, and we give you our ultimate trust. You have authority over us in a way that no other member of society does. So with that big paycheck and with that ultimate authority, we should expect a lot. And so I just don't think that we can be giving that authority and that kind of funding to people that aren't properly trained with a lot of experience in a variety of different educational settings.
Very well said. Very well said.
But just one thing I've just thought in my mind to put out there for your thoughts. Being a former instructor at the Ontario Police College, been there, done it. Being a former sectional lead at the Toronto Police College, Summerville College, we used to bring Crown attorneys. We'd bring in justices, charged of fact, to speak to recruits and to talk about prosecution and the nobility of the profession. I tell you, I am an advocate of bringing in the opposite side, the opposite view. I think it's in terms of a training matrix to bring in a team of plaintiff counsel to also share with the recruits the other side, the other version, other things to consider, to get a balance in your thinking, in your exercise of judgment. I think it'd be fruitful. It should make a prudent person think about it. You're not criticizing the profession, you're criticizing what some people do and how certain issues that changes people's lives could be prevented.
Yeah, the officer, detective that dealt with my family first and me after I was assaulted is an exemplary individual, and I when I see policing, I think of people like that with some of our traffic detectives that we work with, but it's not across the board. And I have to acknowledge that perhaps my experience was that way because of my positionality. I'm a lawyer, I'm a white male, and so. And that isn't the course of treatment that everybody gets, you know.
Yeah.
You know what I really like about you, David. You do like you did not. It seems to me, like based on everything that I heard about you today, that you chose the profession of what you do because it's deep purpose. It's not I'm just doing it because it's a job. There's situations and stories that influenced you, that inspired you. And, you know, it seems like not only are you trying to do the job of prosecution, but you're also trying to like push for change.
With our biking lawyer, and it's the same for our police law stuff, the goal is to advocate for community and help individuals so that we don't need a biking lawyer anymore. The roads are safe, streets are safe enough that people can bike without getting clipped every other block. And the same would be with our police work too. We want to advocate and push for accountability and change that makes policing not what it is today.
No, that's amazing. And look, the hopes is that, you know, especially the fields that we look at, which is policing and security, that they do evolve, and they do evolve for the better, and they do evolve for all the things that we're talking about right now that can take them out of situations, right, that they're in right now. Any last words, Steve? I know, Steve, this has been fantastic, a very eye-opener. Any last words that you want to throw out there or questions that we have here for Dave?
No, I thank Dave for giving up time in his practice. This was difficult to get you out here. But as we've said for the last few years during podcasts and delivering messages to their viewers, is there's another viewpoint. It's not always waving the flag. It's not always being bravado. And it's not always, you know, go out there and just tackle the world. We need to be very, very mindful of what Dave represents through plaintiff. And I'm not fearful of a plaintiff lawyer. I think we can learn a lot from him. just the message they wish to state. If you're listening, Mr. Shellnutt made about 4 or 5 claims, or not claims, points, that if you were to apply that to your business practices, likely you would never have to deal with his colleagues or he himself. That's useful. That's a great day in the office. You got to be open-minded to hear that message, and I hope some of our viewers have. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely, David. Thank you. I hope I never see you in a court setting. But
that's the other thing too.
Yeah.
You know how difficult it is, and counsel acquires style. And I've often said when I teach, you don't know how small you are until you're cross-examined by sage counsel that has experience in discrediting you and causing you trauma when you're trying to represent and trying to go back to telling a story. These guys are good at it. And they could destroy your whole process. And once your credibility is being destroyed, your narrative is really no longer relevant.
No, that's absolutely. I think today, if anything, this is a wake-up call. This is a wake-up call, like literally, for people to look at things, right? Don't get comfortable, right? It's like, why do I need insurance, for example, right? Well, why do you need to have training? Why? Because there's going to come a time, it may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but it will happen. It will catch up to you, right? I really want to thank you for coming on the show today, Steve, as well. Thank you so much for putting this together. I've learned a lot today. And again, the hopes are that many people listening here will take this and elevate their game. As a side question, do you like the show Suits?
That's so funny. Everybody asks that. No, I've never watched it. Really.
No,
there you go.
I live at Constantine.
Oh, do you? Yeah, there you go. Wow, there you go.
What I would just say is, like, we think about the insurance and all that and all the aspects and doing better, but ultimately I think we can all agree we don't want people being injured, and like lives affected by mistakes or uncertain circumstances. So the more we can avoid people being harmed, is better for everybody.
Okay, I love that. Amazing.
Thank you, John.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, hope you enjoyed this, and stay safe. I'm taking it from Steve's mouth right now. David, thank you so much.
Cheers. Thank you.
All right, guys, have a great day. Take care. Thank you for joining me in today's podcast. This podcast was created for protectors in the fields of law enforcement, executive protection, security, and anyone looking to level up their mindset. If you are learning from this podcast and you're enjoying it, please subscribe to our YouTube channel at the Sentinel Mindset. That's a zero-cost way to support us. In addition, please subscribe to the podcast both on Spotify and Apple. And on both Spotify and Apple, you can leave us up to a 5-star review. If you have questions for me or comments about the podcast or guests you would like me to consider on the Sentinel Mindset, please post all comments on YouTube. I do read all the comments. Please also check out our sponsors, thearenatoronto.com. The Arena was created to help all those in the fields of law enforcement, security, and all that achieve their fitness goals. I want to thank our producer, Matthew Doyle, and creative support, Jaslyn Singh, who help me with this podcast every week. We value your feedback and are here to support you. Tune into the Sentinel Mindset every week, where we look in the mirror to make real changes and explore what it takes to achieve greatness in your craft.
This podcast is brought to you by Executive Protection Lifestyle Canada. Make sure to drop by next week and don't forget to subscribe.